Taylor Swift had barely finished celebrating her wedding to Travis Kelce when a new interview changed the conversation completely. One unexpected answer spread across social media, and fans immediately began worrying about what it could mean for the couple's future. Let's break it down. Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce got married on Friday, July 3rd, at Madison Square Garden in New York City. The ceremony brought together roughly 1,000 guests, and the vows were officiated by Adam Sandler. It was by every account the wedding of the year. Stevie Nicks and Paul McCartney provided entertainment, and the bride and groom both wore white. None of that is what's got fans nervous right now, though. What's got them nervous is a comment she made in an interview promoting her album months before the wedding, a comment that's resurfaced hard in the days since she said "I do," and is being read completely differently now that she's actually married. Here's the line. In the run-up to The Life of a Showgirl, Swift sat down for a run of interviews, and in one of them she talked about the song Lit. She said the track is about the different dreams people carry around, and about recognizing that everyone has their own list of things they actually want, separate from what the world tells them to want. And on that list, the one she's singing about, she's not chasing an Oscar or a Palme d'Or. She's dreaming about a driveway with a basketball hoop, a best friend she thinks is hot, and a couple of kids. Now on its own in October, that read as a sweet lyric about a woman in love. But strip it forward to July, to an actual marriage, and fans started doing the math differently. Because in that same stretch of interviews, Swift made it clear this wasn't just a lyric, it was personal. She told one interviewer that the song is precisely about exploring all these lives that people wish to live and all the aspirations they have, but also about recognizing that you have your own wish list. And she connected the best friend, who I think is hot, line directly to Kelce. That's the piece fans have been replaying since the wedding, not the ceremony. The idea that the biggest pop star on the planet had already told everyone, months in advance, that what she actually wants now is to be left alone with a family, and that the wedding might be the moment she starts making good on it. The reaction split almost immediately into three camps, and you can see all three all over social media right now. There's the camp that's thrilled for her. One fan posted that she couldn't read anything about the wedding without getting emotional, calling Swift her close personal friend, only half joking, the way Swifties do. Another fan tied the whole thing back to the Tortured Poets era, saying she used to pray every day during that album cycle for Swift to end up married, and dragged everyone around her into praying too, according to posts collected by Rolling Stone. Then there's a second camp, not against the marriage, but unsettled by what it might mean for everything else. One essay written by a fan the same age as Swift laid it out directly. The writer said the wedding feels like the end of an era, and pointed straight at Willie Lit as proof, noting that Swift sings about wanting to give it all up to have a couple of kids, no longer needing the accolades that built her career in the first place. And then there's a third camp, smaller but loud, made up of people inside the wedding itself, guests who came out the other side of the night with a strange story to tell. We'll get to them, but the short version is this. Multiple insiders described a wedding so massive, so packed with famous faces, that the bride and groom barely got to talk to the people they'd invited. One source put it bluntly, saying the newlyweds didn't get much chance to interact with everyone, and that plenty of attendees left without so much as a real conversation with the couple. So you've got three different reactions stacking on top of each other in the same 48 hours. Joy, worry, and a kind of confusion about what actually happened inside that building. All three are pointing at the same question. What does Taylor Swift want her life to look like now that the wedding is behind her? To answer that, you actually have to go back further than the ceremony. You have to go back to the interview itself, the one where she first said the quiet part out loud, months before anyone thought the wedding was actually happening. Because here's the thing that makes this interview so unsettling to fans in hindsight. She wasn't vague about it. She told a reporter directly that writing Will It was the moment she knew the album was finished. Her exact words were that it was the last song she finished for the record, and that finishing it was when she knew the record was done. In other words, the song about walking away from the spotlight for a family was the final piece of the puzzle, not an afterthought, the keystone. And it's not just that one song. Across the same album, she kept returning to the same idea from different angles. In Fate of Ophelia, she references the very moment Kelce first tried to get her attention, the friendship bracelet story from his podcast, and sings about finally getting what she wants because she knows what she wants. In The Prophecy, a track fans have long connected to her past relationships. She'd once sung about wanting someone who just wanted her company, nothing more. And fans have pointed out that with this marriage, that prophecy has effectively changed. It's her now. So when you line all of it up, the interview, the lyrics, the timing, the wedding, you start to see why this isn't just fans overreacting to a pretty love song. It's fans pattern matching against 20 years of her own words and wondering if this time she actually means it. Because Taylor Swift has talked about marriage before, a lot. And it hasn't always been romantic. If you want to understand why one wedding week interview sent fans spiraling, you need to understand that Swift has been telegraphing her feelings about marriage, good and bad, for 2 decades in plain sight, inside her own songs. Go back to Midnights, the album where she leaned hardest into being an independent woman who didn't need a ring to feel complete. In Lavender Haze, she pushed back directly against the pressure to get married, singing about being damned if she gave a damn what people said, mocking the way the world only seemed to see her as either a one-night stand or a future wife, as if those were the only 2 options available to her. That's not a woman dreaming about a driveway with a basketball hoop. That's a woman actively rejecting the whole premise. But underneath that same album sat another song, Midnight Rain, where she admitted the tension more directly, that a past partner wanted a bride while she was busy building her own name and chasing her own fame. The gap between those 2 songs on one album told you everything about where her head was at the time. Independence, yes, but not without cost. Then came the Tortured Poets department, and the tone shifted from defiant to devastated. In Lomel, she described watching a relationship go from a first kiss straight to talk of marriage, only to have it all fall apart, with lines about talking rings and talking cradles and wishing she could unrecall the whole thing. And then there's the song many fans consider the most brutal marriage reference in her entire catalog, You're Losing Me, a track she wrote years before releasing it, which ends with her admitting, essentially, that even she wouldn't marry herself in that state. It's one of the most quietly devastating lines she's ever put on a record, describing a relationship that had gone terminal, dressed up as a joke about herself. That's the emotional ledger fans are carrying into this wedding. Not just excitement, actual scar tissue from watching her get close to marriage before and watching it collapse. So when the wedding to Kelce actually happened, a lot of longtime fans didn't just feel joy. They felt something closer to disbelief, followed by relief, followed immediately by a kind of protective anxiety. Is this the one that finally works? Or is this going to be another song cycle of heartbreak 2 years from now? That anxiety is exactly why the lit interview hit differently than it would have for any other artist. Because this is a woman who spent an entire album called Midnights arguing she didn't need marriage to feel whole, and then spent the follow-up album grieving a relationship that almost got there and didn't. For her to turn around on the very next record and sing plainly about wanting a couple of kids and a driveway with a basketball hoop, and then tell an interviewer this was the song that finished the whole album. That's not a small pivot. That's a complete rewrite of the narrative she'd been building about herself for years. And she knew it too. In that same string of interviews, she was asked directly about wedding planning, and her answer surprised people. She said she'd never actually been the type of person obsessing over a wedding her whole life, that she'd never given real thought to what she wanted until she met the person she wanted it with. That's a notable shift from an artist whose entire early catalog, going back to Love Story and Mine, was built on fairy tale wedding imagery. She spent her 20s singing about weddings as a fantasy. She spent her 30s, until now, mostly avoiding the topic in real life. And then, almost overnight, she was designing an engagement ring with a jeweler she'd secretly been a fan of for a year and a half, showing Kelce videos of the designer's work long before he ever proposed. There's also the detail about how she's spending her time now that isn't about music at all. In the same interview cycle, when asked if she spends her downtime scrolling social media, she said she's not much of a scroller and that she doesn't keep social media apps on her phone. She said she'd rather spend those hours doing something else or planning something for fans around the album rollout. On the surface, that sounds like healthy boundary setting, but fans have started reading it alongside everything else. The wish list lyrics, the finished album comment, the driveway, and the kids, as one more thread in a pattern of a woman consciously stepping back from the noise she spent her whole career building. It's worth remembering, too, that Swift has always dropped these hints months or years before anyone else catches on. Back on a Graham Norton show appearance well before the engagement was public, she was asked point blank whether she was planning on going big with a future wedding, and she gave an answer that, in hindsight, told you the whole plan. She said she meant she'd invite everyone she'd ever spoken to. At the time, it played as a joke. She wasn't stressed about planning a wedding. she said, because everyone would know when it happened and it would be a spectacle. She told the entire audience, on camera, exactly what was coming. And almost nobody believed her until a guest list of 1,000 people walked into Madison Square Garden and proved she'd meant every word. That track record is exactly why this new interview is being taken so seriously. This isn't a woman who talks in riddles for the sake of mystery. When Taylor Swift tells you what's coming, it tends to come. She told the world she was going big on the wedding a year before it happened, and it happened exactly the way she described. So when she tells the world, months before the ceremony, that the album's final song is about wanting a family more than she wants an Oscar, fans aren't wrong to take that literally. They've learned over and over that with her, the literal reading is usually the correct one, which is exactly why what happened inside the wedding itself has become such a flashpoint. Because if this really was the night she stepped toward the quieter life she'd been describing, the last thing fans expected to hear about was a ceremony so big that even the people inside it couldn't get near her. Here's where the story gets strange. If the interview suggested Swift was dreaming about a smaller, quieter life, the wedding itself did the opposite. It was enormous. And according to multiple people who were actually there, that size came with a cost nobody was expecting. The bride and groom barely got to talk to their own guests. A report that circulated in the days after the ceremony laid it out plainly. Despite roughly 1,000 people being invited, many of them admitted they barely knew Swift and Kelce personally at all. One insider described a running joke that apparently made its way around the room all night. Guests kept asking each other how exactly they knew the bride and groom, because so few of them had a real answer. Another source close to the situation went further, saying that while there were genuine friends in the crowd, a large portion of the guest list was made up of famous, influential people who didn't have any real connection to the couple. The guest list itself, this source said, became its own spectacle, bigger than the ceremony, almost a story unto itself. And because there were so many people to get through, the newlyweds reportedly couldn't give most of them any real time. One insider said plainly that a lot of attendees couldn't even greet the couple properly, adding that plenty of guests didn't even walk away with Taylor's phone number or email to say thank you afterward. The line that stuck with people was blunt. That's what happens when your wedding turns into a celebrity convention. That detail landed hard against the backdrop of the interview. Because if you're a fan who just heard Taylor Swift say, months earlier, that all she wants is a driveway with a basketball hoop and a couple of kids, a small domestic dream, and then you hear that her actual wedding was so oversized that even her own guests couldn't get a hug or a conversation with her, the two stories don't sit easily next to each other. It raises the obvious question. If this is a woman trying to step towards something quieter, why build a night this loud? Not everyone experienced it that way, to be fair. Some guests came out with completely different stories, accounts of warmth, not distance. Author Glennon Doyle, who attended with her wife, Abby Wambach, posted a message to the couple describing the night as intentional and real, saying she'd never witnessed a happier bride or groom in her life. When someone in the comments asked if the wedding had been fabulous, Doyle answered that it was, and also tender, somehow big yet small at the same time. That account paints an entirely different picture, one where the couple did make the room feel intimate despite its size. So you've got two competing stories about the same building on the same night. One says the couple was swallowed by their own guest list, unable to connect with the very people they invited. The other says the night felt personal and warm despite 1,000 names on the list. Both can't be fully true at the same time, and that contradiction is part of why the story hasn't settled down since the wedding happened. Media coverage picked up on this tension almost immediately. One widely shared piece framed the entire event as a spectacle that almost nobody actually got to see unfold. Everyone had an opinion about it, but almost no one witnessed it firsthand, unless they happened to be among the roughly 1,000 VIPs inside. That's an unusual position for the most watched couple on the planet to be in, a wedding that generated more headlines than almost any event of the year, built entirely on secondhand accounts because the people who could confirm what actually happened were either sworn to silence or genuinely too far from the couple to know. Reporters on the ground outside Madison Square Garden captured a similar split in mood among fans gathered on the street. One woman in her 40s who said she only became a Swift fan after her daughter dragged her to a concert described being thrilled for the couple, saying she was genuinely pleased for them, really pleased for them. That's the surface level story. Strangers on a sidewalk, happy for two people they'll never meet. But even that same reporting noted the surrounding uncertainty. For days leading up to the wedding, People wondered whether the whole thing was even real, or some kind of elaborate ruse, given how tightly the couple had kept their plans under wraps. Even the location was a guessing game, until literally the day of, with swarms of fans and reporters chasing false leads at Swift's Rhode Island property weeks earlier, only to find nothing there. That secrecy is actually part of the story too. Swift has a habit of controlling exactly how much the public sees of her personal life, releasing details in her own time, on her own terms, through lyrics or documentaries rather than press statements. And yet this wedding, for all its size, still managed to stay locked down until the actual day. Dozens of black cars pulling up outside MSG before anyone outside the guest list knew for certain it was really happening. So here's where things stand after all of that. An interview that painted a picture of a woman craving a small life. A wedding that by size alone was the opposite of small. Guest accounts that contradict each other about whether the couple actually got to enjoy their own night. And a public still trying to reconcile all of it into one coherent story. Which brings us to the part of this that fans have been arguing about the hardest. Not what happened at the wedding, but what happens next. Because buried in all of this is a bigger question about Swift's career and whether the woman who just built the biggest tour in music history is actually getting ready to walk away from the spotlight altogether. This is the part of the story where fan anxiety stops being about one interview and starts being about a pattern stretching back years. A pattern that a lot of people now believe was building toward exactly this moment. Start with the Eras Tour. For a huge portion of Swift's fanbase, that tour never felt like a normal victory lap. It felt like a farewell, even though nobody said the word out loud. One fan, writing about her own complicated feelings toward the wedding, described exactly this, that she and her friends spent the entire tour discussing how it felt like a goodbye. A greatest hits tour without ever calling it that. At the time, most people brushed that feeling off as fan paranoia, the kind of thing Swifties always worry about after a big tour ends. But then came the engagement, then came the album, then came the wedding, and each one added another layer to a theory that used to sound irrational and now sounds almost obvious in hindsight. That same essay connected the dots even further, pointing directly at Whistlit as proof. The writer argued that Swift releasing an album about wanting to give it all up for a family, right after what felt like a farewell tour, all but confirmed that a hiatus is coming. That new music might be a long way off, precisely because she no longer needs the achievements that built her career in the first place. It's a heavy read on a pop song, but it's not coming out of nowhere. It's coming from a fan who has spent over a decade tracking every hint Swift has ever dropped, and noticing that those hints tend to come true. There's a deeper emotional layer here too, one that goes beyond just chart performance or tour schedules. A lot of longtime fans, particularly women around Swift's own age, have described feeling like her marriage forces a kind of reckoning in their own lives. One essay described the strange emotional pull of watching someone your own age, who you'd built into a symbol of staying unmarried and career-focused without apology, suddenly shift into a completely different life stage. The writer admitted that for years she'd found it reassuring that Swift, like her, remained unmarried and childless well into her 30s. Proof that a woman could ignore those milestones and still be considered successful, admired, and complete. Watching that change didn't just feel like watching a celebrity get married. It felt, for some fans, like losing a mirror. That kind of parasocial grief doesn't show up as anger. It shows up as worry, dressed up as concern for Swift's career, when really it's concern about what her choices say about the fans' own lives. That's part of why the interview clip spread the way it did. It wasn't just being shared as gossip. It was being shared as evidence, proof that something bigger was shifting, something fans had a personal stake in. Not every fan is buying the hiatus theory though, and the pushback has been just as loud. Some people online have pointed out that Swift has said things like this before, about wanting a normal life, about being tired of the noise, and has always come back, usually bigger than before. They point to the sheer scale of her career. A woman who just headlined the highest grossing tour of all time doesn't simply vanish because she got married. Others have noted that plenty of artists have kids and keep working. Motherhood and a career aren't automatically opposites, even if the wishlist lyrics frame them as competing dreams in the moment. There's also a financial angle skeptics keep bringing up. In the lead up to the wedding, Swift and Kelce jointly announced a $26 million donation split across 20 charities, including children's hospitals and food banks. That's not the move of two people quietly retreating from public life. That's a couple still very much operating at a massive visible scale, making headlines and shaping conversation right up until the moment they walked down the aisle. Even the reaction to their wedding announcement image, the Just T&T Married sign lit up outside Madison Square Garden, became national news, drawing responses from ordinary fans all the way up to the White House itself, which posted its own message referencing her tour timed to the wedding weekend. None of that reads like a woman trying to disappear. So the honest picture, once you line up every piece, is more complicated than a straight yes or no on whether she's stepping away. What you actually have is a woman whose lyrics, interviews, and life choices are all clearly moving toward wanting more privacy and more family time than she's had in over a decade, and a public life that, at least for now, remains as loud, as visible, and as newsworthy as it's ever been. Both things are happening at once. The wedding didn't resolve the tension between those two realities. If anything, it sharpened it, because now there's a concrete marriage, a home life to build, and an album's worth of lyrics on record, describing exactly what she said she wanted from it, which leaves fans in a strange holding pattern. The interview created the question. The wedding didn't answer it, and nobody, not the guests, not the reporters outside Madison Square Garden, not even the couple themselves in any public statement so far, has said definitively what happens to her career from here. So where does all of this actually leave things a few days removed from the wedding itself? The marriage is real. The vows are done. Adam Sandler officiated, 1,000 guests attended, and by every account, the ceremony itself went off exactly the way Swift and Kelce wanted it to. That part of the story isn't in question anymore. What's still very much unresolved is everything the interview stirred up in the days that followed. The question of what she actually wants her life to look like now that the wedding is behind her. Kelce, for his part, is still an active NFL tight end, heading into another season with the Kansas City Chiefs, which means at minimum, the couple isn't stepping away from public life entirely, not with football season approaching, and cameras that will inevitably find her in the stands again. That alone complicates any theory of a total retreat from the spotlight. You can't disappear from public view while also showing up at NFL stadiums on Sunday afternoons, and nobody expects Swift to stop doing that. At the same time, nothing about her recent comments suggests she's walking those words back. She hasn't said the Weich lyrics were just artistic license. She hasn't clarified that the driveway and the basketball hoop and the couple of kids were metaphor rather than plan. If anything, every follow-up detail, the ring designed with a jeweler she'd secretly admired, the wedding planning she said she'd never thought about until she met the right person, the choice to keep social media at arm's length rather than lean into it, points the same direction the interview did in the first place. What's genuinely new, and what fans are now watching closely, is whether the next chapter of her career reflects any of that shift. There's no confirmed timeline for new music. There's no tour on the books. The last album cycle closed with a song she herself called the final piece of the whole project, the one that told her the record was finished, and that song was about wanting something quieter than fame. Whether that turns into an actual pause, or whether it turns into just another chapter she writes songs about later, is something only time is going to answer, not an interview clip or a wedding night. What we do know is how the people around her have described that night. Some, like the guests who felt lost in a sea of 1,000 unfamiliar faces, walked away describing distance, a couple too stretched to properly greet the people they invited. Others, like the friends who stood closer to the couple all evening, described something closer to intimacy, a room that somehow felt small despite its size. Both of those accounts came out of the same building, the same night, the same couple. That contradiction hasn't been resolved either, and it may never fully be, because 1,000 different guests are always going to walk away with 1,000 different versions of the same few hours. For now, the newlyweds have gone quiet in the way newlyweds usually do. No immediate follow-up interviews, no statement addressing any of the theories swirling around the wedding, or the wish list lyrics or the guest list controversy. That silence is probably intentional, and it's probably temporary. Swift has never stayed silent for long. She has a track record of letting her own timeline dictate when the world gets more information, whether that's a surprise album drop, a documentary, or a single lyric, buried in a bridge that fans won't fully understand for another year. What's clear right now is this: the wedding happened exactly the way she said, months in advance, that it would big, loud, impossible to miss, exactly like she told Graham Norton it would be, long before anyone believed her. And the interview that's been resurfacing since, the one about the driveway, the basketball hoop, the couple of kids, was delivered with the same confidence, the same directness. She doesn't tend to say things she doesn't mean. That's the pattern fans have learned to trust over 20 years of her career. And it's exactly why this particular interview isn't fading from the conversation. The way most wedding week headlines do. Whatever comes next for Taylor Swift, whether that's new music sooner than anyone expects, or the quieter chapter she described in her own lyrics, one thing hasn't changed. People are still listening to every word she says as closely as they ever have. Maybe more closely now than ever. Because for the first time in a long time, those words might actually be about something other than a song. Sources: CBS News, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce married in ceremony officiated by Adam Sandler. CBS News details emerge after Taylor Swift marries Travis Kelce in NYC. Today, what we know about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce's wedding: 266,197,573,812 today. Taylor Swift, Life of a Showgirl album released. Lyrics and interview highlights. Capital FM, Taylor Swift's wish list lyrics and hidden meaning explained. Hello Magazine. Taylor Swift told the world about her wedding a year ago. Hello Magazine. Complicated feelings about Taylor Swift's wedding. Yahoo Entertainment. Taylor Swift's wedding left guests wondering why they were invited. 73,952,588. NBC News, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce's celebrity wedding. The spectacle nobody got to watch. NPR. After weeks of speculation, Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce wed in New York. Parade. Taylor Swift fans obsessed with wedding guests' description. Rolling Stone. Fans react to Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce's happily ever after. 1,235,588,934. Variety. How Taylor Swift's wedding was preceded by 20 years of marriage lyrics. 1,236,801,712